Let me know what you think. Do you prefer the Colorado sand or the original kind of pebble look? Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. A very simple one today. We're going to replace the current gravel stroke sand foreground with a brand new sand. This is Colorado sand from ADA, kindly donated by Aquarium Gardens. It's actually not a very commonly used cosmetic sand in the hobby, and I just wanted to kind of show it off in this aquascape. The warm tones and the textures I think are really going to suit this aquascape. Now there's nothing wrong currently with this foreground, and it's actually arguably beneficial. It's got a coating of algae which the shrimp and the gobies will enjoy, but I am really keen to change the aesthetic. I really love the idea of having the contrast of a relatively clinical foreground and then suddenly going into a very kind of complex and full-on colourful background. So just a bit of background for you. I first discovered the concept of the cosmetic sand foreground early 2000s, and this was something, not surprisingly maybe for some of you, was invented by Takashi Amano. And the common technique was just to have foreground carpeting plants in your aquascape. And if you look at the vast majority of nature aquarium foregrounds before the early 2000s did have this full-on carpet. So Amano was quite keen to do something lower maintenance, perhaps something more suitable for those without so much lighting. As many of you will know, we tend to need more light and more CO2, more circulation in order to grow many carpeting plants. Not all carpeting plants, you can grow carpeting plants low tech and in relatively low light, but for the majority of people you will need decent lighting and CO2 to grow most carpeting plants. So that's how the cosmetic foreground came into play. We've got a beautiful foreground here and I'm quite keen to change it up. I'll probably thin out some of the leaves as well. It is looking very kind of jungly and overgrown, which I do like, but we do need to maintain it. We don't want to choke the aquascape. We do need some room for the fish to swim. There's probably between 80 and 100 fish in here. And yeah, we'll just take you through the process. It's very straightforward. We simply remove the biggest stones to start with, just with my hands, and then using a 16mm hose, siphon out the remaining substrate there, and then simply using a little jug, just gently sprinkle the new sand over the top. Really straightforward, and a really straightforward video. That's hard work. I've cut myself, or contusion. Long story short, the bucket was really heavy, full of the stones, so I went to kind of launch it into the garden, into the kind of back of the garden to feed everything and get rid of everything, and I kind of slipped and caught the handle on my wrist. So health and safety, don't forget, always take care of yourselves. Hi everyone, just interrupting this video to ask a massive favour. If you've enjoyed any of my content so far, out of any of the videos, and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd be so grateful if you hit the subscribe button. What this means is, in the long term, it gives me more opportunities to create even better content for you. I've got some really exciting plans and I'd love to share those with you. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like. I did some checks on the stats, which I don't normally do, but there's only 4 or 5%, sometimes more, depending on the video, of course, of you hitting the like button. I'd like to think there's more than 4 or 5% of you that do like the videos. Please consider hitting the like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does mean the world. Just grateful for you watching so far. Enjoy the rest of the video. I've removed as much of the foreground as I want to now. are going to be here forever, getting rid of all of it. It's not going to serve much purpose getting rid of every single bit of it. I can do a top layer with the Colorado sand. The idea is that the very front of the Colorado sand will be in line with the trim here, this aluminium trim, and then slightly sloped towards the rear. So I'm siphoning as I am doing the sand. It's quite a messy process, but it is what it is, you know. Sometimes you have to break some eggs to make an omelette, as they say. Smelly cat, what are they feeding you? Smelly cat, it's not your fault. You can see there's a load of sand settling on the Anubias and the rocks. You can just clean that off just by waving your hand around. It really is a case of it's going to look a lot worse before it looks better, which is often the case when you're doing something pretty drastic. You're quite a significant aesthetic change. And you see we've got some soil moving forward already from the background, so that's a little bit annoying. That's going to just happen more and more. So I'm going to have to come up with a solution to create a barrier to prevent that migration of the soil. I think the pebbles were a lot more forgiving because there were big gaps between them, and then all the detritus could, you know, the bits of soil could go in between the rocks and you wouldn't see them. That's not necessarily a good thing because that could potentially just lead to a lot of excess decomposition of stuff that you can't see. That leads to organic waste, which can then potentially lead to algae issues in a high-tech system. You know, I am learning more about these low-tech, you know, water change methods where, you know, you can potentially just leave it to do what it needs to do. But this isn't low-tech. You know, we're using a lot of light. We're using CO2 injection. It's very different, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with being different. And spray these plants to prevent them from drying out. Once a plant's adapted to grow underwater, it's really important to keep it wet. If it dries out significantly, it will damage the plant tissue, and it can lead to the plant leaf dying off, which we don't want. Another jug. So I've not even used half a bag yet. So, you know, with the maintenance sessions in the future, you can literally siphon off all of the detritus, any ugly bits that you don't like to see, just siphon that off gently, and then you can just add another layer of the Colorado sand as required. So Dave Pearce has used this sand in the Aquascape of 1200 Aquarium Gardens. That's where I first noticed it, and I think it's lovely. And I just thought the tone matches the kind of autumnness of the colours of these leaves, and we are heading into autumn now, so it seems quite appropriate to reflect that kind of vibe with this new foreground. You know, the foreground's really important. It's the first part of the scape that you obviously see. So if we want to create that initial high impact, you know, a good first impression, then it's important to have a good foreground. You know, we could use play sand if we wanted to, you know, but it's much lighter. It is also, the texture is very monotone. It's very, very fine, and it's just like one grain size, whereas this, it does, when you look up really close, I'll get some macro shots of it, it does actually have slightly different colours in the grains and slightly different sizes. This adds to the overall natural kind of effect that it gives you, and you don't necessarily get that with other sands, and arguably, you know, that's why you can justify spending the extra money on, you know, ADA. It wouldn't surprise me if many of you prefer the old look before this. You don't know, do you, unless you try. There's nothing wrong with trying. There's nothing wrong with making a perceived mistake. I'm going to siphon a bit more out. That's just going into the garden to feed the garden, and then we'll top off soon. It is cloudy, of course. It will be cloudy probably once we've topped off, but it will clear by the morning. and by the time I get around to editing this video, I'm sure it'll be crystal clear again. So the really interesting thing is now, because all of these plants are exposed to the air, they're absolutely sucking in that CO2 from the CO2 gas from the air, and they're going to saturate themselves with it. And then once we're filled with water, all of those plants are going to pearl like crazy. For those that don't know, pearling is the actual visible production of the oxygen bubbles on the plant leaves, and it's one of my favourite processes that you actually can see in the aquarium. Very exciting. I think some Corydoras along the bottom now would look amazing. Quite inspired by the Aquascape 1200 from Aquarium Gardens with a Colorado sand foreground. I actually made a video with the owner, Dave Pierce, last night, and that's going to be the next video after this one. So excited to bring that one to you. I don't know about you guys, I prefer it. I know it's more minimal and arguably less natural looking, but I really enjoy that contrast of that real clean look, and then suddenly going into the dense plantation. It reminds me of like a beach. I guess that kind of warm texture sand is quite invoking of a beach kind of scene. Let me know what you think. Do you prefer the Colorado sand or the original kind of pebble look? Curious to know. It's actually a couple of days now since I did the changeover, and I'm surprised there's not much more detritus and soil that's gone forward. There are a lot of amino shrimp which tend to move things around, so I'm pleased about that. It is quite a deep tank, and it is actually quite tricky to reach all the way down, so siphoning can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're not so tall. So I think it's just as part of the weekly maintenance I usually do, I'll probably just siphon off any loose detritus that we can see from the sand, and then I have at least half a bag of the sand left over, and it will literally just be an inch or so in a jug, and then just sprinkle it over the top. Really happy with this Aquascape. My favourite heavily planted Aquascape that I've ever done in my 20 years plus in the hobby now. And it's going to carry on going. I'm really happy with it. The combination of the swords, the crypts in the background. These crypts here are just getting huge. I'm going to thin them out soon. Let's have a bit of a chat, shall we? About expensive kind of luxury branded products. I think the video I did before this one was the low-tech nano tanks video, which is almost the opposite of this. And if we calculated the cost of everything here brand new, you're looking at a lot more expensive obviously than a small low-tech nano cube like this. But that's the great thing, isn't it, about the hobby? There's something for everyone. There's something to suit all tastes, all budgets, all circumstances, all life circumstances. Whether you live in a small high-rise apartment where something like this is unfeasible, or you're financially independent and you can afford whatever you like. It's more about what is your actual goal for the hobby. What do you want to get out of it? Sometimes people don't have to think about that, and that's cool, isn't it? I just do the hobby because I love it. I guess I'm very analytical in my approach to things sometimes. I do tend to, in inverted commas, overthink things. I try not to do so much of that these days. I think meditation helps. But I adore this aquarium, and so grateful to my sponsors, of course, Awase, Tropica and Fritz for making things like this possible. of course, to you guys for watching my content. Without you, there would be no channel and I'd have no real purpose with YouTube. So deeply grateful for you, the viewer. Thank you. Take care. I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheerio.